Batou,
Yes.
we miss you.
Oh, stop it.
We do, we do. So,
Yeah.
so tell us what you're up to these days.
Man, I mean, yeah. Thank you. First of all, that's a nice way to start. I appreciate it. I also miss Berlin. Yeah. Now it feels kind of far away. I mean, these days I'm just doing many things, a lot of music, mostly, just all the time. So it's very, yeah, it's all encompassing, but I love it, you know. I feel
So
like
you-
I'm getting better as a musician too, but it's just like playing different genres.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, you went to Spain
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
to study at
I'm in
Berkeley.
Valencia. Yeah, Berkeley, Valencia.
Yeah,
Exactly. I'm
that's
studying
Valencia.
performance and production.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it couldn't be better timing since we had the Corona thing,
Mhm.
and we can't play concerts anyway. And then you're like, well, guys, I'm gonna take a year off and
Yeah.
go study. So
Yeah.
you know,
That was a bet. I mean, because I didn't know if it would be worth it to study, but I was like, you know, on the other hand, I was like, if I want to study one more year, now is the time to do it because the industry is asleep anyways. At least for bands like us, finding a gig now is close to impossible.
yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah.
Perfect timing. How do you guys do it in school? Do you have to show it? Do you show up in class together, or is it all online, or how does that work?
Yeah, it's hybrid. It depends, but a lot of online classes, which can be problematic sometimes, but sometimes it's also helpful. Like for example, I don't know if we're studying Pro Tools, working on software. It's just so Zoom and other softwares like this. It's just so practical.
Yeah, yeah. And is it a master's now? Because you have
Yeah.
a bachelor's already in music, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But you have a couple of bachelors already. Like, what do you have so far?
Yeah, I mean, I have
Yeah.
them, but it's been now it feels distant. You know, I have a bachelor in English literature, and a bachelor in law. Studied French law in Versailles a couple of years ago.
And you're only a puppy, and you already have 3 degrees and working on your master's.
Yeah,
That's insane.
actually, it's funny because we played a gig actually recently in Toulouse, in the south of France,
Mhm.
like a live stream. I mean, I'm saying gig but it was a live stream.
Yeah.
And I met this woman who was a piano player, but she was also at the École de la Magistrature. I think she graduated, so she was like a French magistrate.
Yeah.
She was she was not a judge, but she was working for the institution, and we had a nice conversation. Reminded me of studying law in the French institutions back in the day. It was fun.
But you don't miss it?
No, not at all. But unfortunately I've forgotten a lot of what I knew at the time.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
no, I'm more struggling to find a way to make it make sense in my general evolution as a human being. Why
Yeah.
did I study law for 3 years? I don't
Well, I mean,
know.
I don't know anyone like you, and I mean that in a positive way. You have a curiosity for life that I find really, really inspiring. And I've talked
Thank you.
to the guys about that also. Me and Robin were just recently talking about that it's insane how much of a hunger you have for knowledge and for, you know, trying things out and seeing where it takes you. And I don't think I know anyone quite at that level, and that's really, really cool.
Thank you for the compliment. Yeah.
Well, it's also an observation because it's definitely something that I can use for myself.
I mean, it's
you know?
exciting for me, you know, learning about new things. I don't know. But it's just how it is for me. I understand that it's not necessarily the same for... I mean, I think everybody has it, but maybe on different varying degrees. Some people are more interested in like one area. I think if I'm fascinated with everything, it's more with where different areas of knowledge meet. You know, the Venn diagram, the intersections.
Mm-hmm.
It's fascinating to me. So it's always... Like, for example, I'm an amateur, of course, but like I've looked at evolutionary biology like quite in detail for the past 4 or 5 years, and I've been so fascinated by it, you know, because it's just like intersects with everything we're interested in love, you know, like relationships, music, like how your body behaves under pressure. It's so fascinating. So I think if anything, that's something I'm interested in.
Everything's connected.
Yeah. I mean, it's all like different approaches to the same kind of object, which is the world we live in.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we've known each other for years, but
Yeah.
you're a recent addition to the band. For a long time, you weren't quite were in a place where you wanted to be part of Substereo, yet we would still sit for hours and hours and talk about all sorts of subjects, and that's basically our relationship. You and I, as we were sitting down in the living room, drinking coffee, talking for 8,
Tea.
sometimes, or tea. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, because you don't drink coffee after a certain time.
Yeah, and I remember some conversations we had until like 7 a.m. or I mean especially 1. Yeah.
We
Yeah, I
talked
think
for 10
so.
hours just recently. I think when you were here, I think we talked for like 10 hours one day when you came over.
Yeah,
which is
but there
pretty
was one time especially where we talked until like 6 or 7 a.m. in the morning. But
Yeah.
before we recorded the first podcast, but I don't know, it was just so interesting. Because you also
Yeah.
have a super interesting life story full of like very varied. You've done so much, you know. So
I'm a product of circumstance where you kind of go headstrong, and tackle life.
Yeah, I don't
in a way
know.
that
I don't
I'm
know
not
if
sure that I
I'm.
dare.
Yeah, I mean that is very nice of you to say, but I'm not sure it's that. It's just following my interest, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I've been thrown around all over the world, from one country to another country all my life, but pretty much everything that I've done has been because of something that has been out of my control. Usually, I mean, not everything, but this means that that it's actually quite interesting to see how other people grab onto life in a way that I haven't. And you definitely, I think that's why we have these conversations, because we are two different sides of the same coin in many ways, I think. Also musically speaking.
In what sense? In what sense? What do you mean?
Well, I mean, musically speaking, you have, for example, a very theoretical approach, but you also have a very
Do we want to talk about this?
well, I mean,
yeah, I'm not sure that I have such a theoretical approach. Oh yeah, you talked about it with Robin. Yeah, it's
I
true.
did, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
But
I mean, I think maybe that's your vision, but I mean, I think you're not wrong, but it's something I'm getting further and further away from.
yeah,
I mean, theory is a good. It can be a buffer sometimes, and like reality is a bit more fluffy, not fluffy, but fuzzy and complicated than just this is correct, this is not. But it's also helpful in many ways. Yeah, I guess you're not wrong.
it's about
After all.
it's about applying. I mean, theory is fine. It's just not fine if you're not able to apply it. And I mean that in a theoretical sense in every aspect of life, not only music. Because if you approach life as if it were a math project that needs to be solved, you're not going to solve it, because the reality of life is trial and error in many ways, and that's kind of what's inspiring about the way you've approached it. That's what I mean, because, for example, you started a podcast, like out of the blue. You're like, oh well, that's something I want to try, and you studied it, and you went into detail, like how do people do it, and looked at examples and mapped the whole thing out, and just went ahead and did it. And when you did it, I was one of your trial subjects in the very beginning, and you've developed since then, and you've had quite a lot of success with your podcast, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, for me, maybe did you say out of the blue? Because for me, it was more of a gradual thing. Because I started listening to. Of course.
Hey, I'm gonna do a podcast. I'm like, okay.
Well, I mean, yeah, I haven't been working on it lately. Unfortunately, I haven't had the time, but I'm hoping to resume it very soon. But yeah, basically the way it went in my head is that I was listening to podcasts more and more, especially Sam Harris, who really inspired me.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, there is this whole area that I'm interested in, music. There is a couple of like music scholars that I see out there that write papers that I cannot find anything on the internet besides their papers that are very often like hidden behind paywalls and stuff. Yeah. And I was like, okay, I'll just merge the two things and shoot them a message and see if it works. So yeah, you were a bit like my guinea pig, you know, because I didn't want to jump into the bath just yet. So I knew we had good conversations, and I knew you were comfortable also like with a mic in front of your mouth and everything. So I was like, that was a no-brainer.
Yeah.
And then then I moved on to interview like these people that are very, and I learned one thing or two actually. Podcasting is very interesting.
Yeah.
Because some people are great at what they do, but they're not necessarily great at talking about it. And so that's why on my podcast I've interviewed mostly professors and people who teach in in universities and stuff, because these people are used to public speaking.
Yeah.
And they want to do it, and that's also something that they excel at. And we're not talking about like a lone deranged musician or somebody who's a genius but who cannot necessarily express it into words. So it made me realize that these two things are very much separated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, what's interesting about your podcast, I mean, I find it absolutely fascinating. It's that a lot of it is stuff that when I listen to the way you talk to your guests, I'm like, my God, you have prepared so much. It's like, you can tell you've been sitting there for hours and hours and hours studying their papers and looking into details. And then when you talk to them, like they're actually talking to somebody who gets them. I mean, that's the feeling I get off the podcast, which is very empowering as a listener in many ways, because you're like, you're listening there and like, okay, like what would I ask? I always tend to do that, you know, like what would I ask? And the questions you ask move me to a completely different area than what I would have expected.
I mean, in a way that also, I think being in music school, I don't have to study as much as before, like texts and books and stuff. So maybe I was missing this a little bit. And this allows me to leverage my nerdiness, if I can say. So now I'm studying for a reason. So yeah, some of them, I mean, lots of them, I read hundreds of pages of like papers and references and like got into rabbit holes and then did even more research after the fact for the footnotes. Yeah. But sometimes because I love it, you know, and I know my guests themselves are grateful for it. They see that, oh wow, he actually read my paper, he read the footnotes, he went and looked at the papers that I mentioned in the references, etc. But sometimes I'm worried that for the listener that just like tunes in casually, it might be a little bit too much. And sometimes I'm talking to my guest a little bit, you know, I'm taking too deep of a dive, and sometimes maybe I'm losing the listener. It's a balance to strike. It's not easy, but
yeah, it's always a balance. I mean, you never know. I mean, the most important thing is you just do things like the way we play music, also that we do it for the enjoyment of it, for
follow your interest.
Yeah. Exactly. And that's I think it's super important for any form or any art form, and podcasting definitely is, and thinking is an art form as well. And it's just super.
But I feel like this is a bet on the immensity of the internet and of the unicity of human nature and human interests, because you basically follow your interest, and so you're taking a bet, which is the fact that, okay, I'm very interested in this, I'm fascinated, and I get it to some extent. There must be a bunch of people out there that are on the same wavelength and are fascinated by it in the way that I am, and that will like react positively to what I'm putting out there. So this is the bet, you know, this is the beauty of the internet.
Yeah, if they build it, they will come. That's the theory. And there's, people who agree with that and people who don't. I believe there's a niche for everything out there, and it's just a matter of getting out to the people. That's the problem with the internet these days, is that you have a gatekeeper in many ways, and you put your art forth, and it could basically be buried in obscurity, despite the fact that there is a niche out there, because you simply can't. It's not that you would fail. It's not that your art isn't good enough. It's just that, I mean, not you specifically, I mean in general, right? That someone's art would be good enough. It's the fact that nobody, or not the right people, get to listen to it.
Yeah.
And that's the bet.
Yeah. I mean, this is a complex question, because the internet really in its early stages, one of its biggest strengths was to facilitate sorry, I'm speaking French now, I'm losing my English, was to I said justement, which is like indeed, you know, to facilitate, I started to say it, the contact between a potential audience and a content creator. Back in the day, it was impossible. Like you had to find a patron, very, you know, with a lot of means and hoping that you would stay in their good graces for long enough, you know.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
now, and so the internet like kind of removed the middleman, but now it's coming back again with full force. At least it seems from an outsider, from my point of view, with just a stranglehold that big companies like Google and Facebook, among others, have, and they're able to, yeah, they're basically imposing their own rules, and it's so interesting.
Well, what's interesting about it is that people tend to whine a lot, including us, about about, you know, how the internet is kind of well, putting us in a corner, or judging us, or just locking us down. So basically, if we post anything on any of the big Facebook or Instagram or whatever, that nobody will get to see it unless we pay them money. That's the reality. It's a pay-to-play platform for a lot of businesses these days. And the truth of the matter is that if we had lived in the 80s, we would not get heard unless we had the money for advertisement.
Yeah.
So how?
Or we would have to get signed and
yeah,
and
then
do
they
a
would
bunch.
pay for it, and then it's basically getting signed is the same as taking a loan, basically, with a record company. So I think we've just been spoiled by the fact that we, for many years, were able to share our music. I think maybe from the like 2004, 2005 when it started, up until maybe 2012, 13.
Yeah.
We were able to share our music and get heard without
Mm-hmm.
having to pay a pretty penny for it. That's changing.
Yeah.
And the question is, what now? You know, because the audience is there, but they're not going to hear it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not talking only about music. I'm talking about anything. I mean, if you're a painter, if you're a podcaster, whatever. I mean, you have to invest in advertisement. What do you think that's going to do to the art?
Man, you're asking me crazy questions. I don't know. I just remember the time of the like Wild West, if I can say, the wild, the World Wide Web. You know, like maybe 10 years ago or like 15 years ago, when I was really getting into computers and getting interested in that and in IP, intellectual property. And I was like, okay, I was also starting to play bass guitar, and I was like, this whole downloading and peer-to-peer and BitTorrent thing is great, but how is it supposed to work out? And then I was like reading about copylefts and like open source, and I was really into that. But unfortunately, something I got convinced of more and more progressively is that there was going to be a new way of consuming music, and it was going to work out for the big shots and not for the artists. Like, they were going to find a way to make the system work in their favor. And with streaming, of course, like, not to jump on the Spotify criticism bandwagon, because it's actually a more complex problem than it looks. But the artists are not at the center of the equation at all.
Yeah,
they are more like cows that you milk. And this is something I've been discussing with people, is that the music industry nowadays looks more and more like a pyramid scheme. It sounds very intense and maybe a little bit pessimistic, but that's the way I see it. It's a bit like this multi-level marketing schemes, like Tupperware, you know what I mean? So
yeah.
like you have you cannot buy a Tupperware in a shop. That's the idea. You go to a Tupperware party that's organized by your neighbor or your best friend, and you bring all your friends, and you're selling them Tupperwares, and maybe you're selling them on the idea that they could become Tupperware sellers as well. Mm-hmm. And every time they sell some to their friends, you touch a commission on it. You earn a little bit of money off it. And so and it's just like this. It's like concentric circles like this. And the closer you are to the center, the more money you make. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
With music, I feel like it's a little bit like this, in the sense that now we have, it's just, the 21st century. You have tons of kids full of with the eyes full of stars and dreams and hopes, and they have their parents' money, which is good for them. And there is whole system. The people say there is no money in music. Maybe it's true, but there is a lot of money in like para musical stuff. Like the gear industry buying, like I mean, maybe not guitars, but buying all kinds of gear, software, computers, speakers, buying different like courses to learn how to reach an audience. This is booming. This is amazing. So and also like teaching. Now there are more teachers, people on the internet, self-proclaimed teachers with like credentials that vary from completely BS to serious teachers.
Yeah.
So you have the whole gambit, you have the whole like palette right there. But it's just, it feels like it's a good time to be on the outside, like helping, quote unquote, people to make music.
Yeah. What made you want to do it? I mean, out of all the talents that you have, why music?
You're asking me about my master plan?
Your master plan, or your master's plan in this case, since you're studying for a master's.
Yeah, I'm joking. I don't really have a master plan. It's just that I think it's Schopenhauer who said that like a life without art and without music is really not worth living. And it sounds trite and so cliche to say music saved my life, but I mean, I'm not saying that it did. I think I would be perfectly fine without music, but I think something would be missing, and maybe probably life would still be worth living, but I don't know. It's just the thing that touches me the most emotionally. It's just the most reliable source of emotional movement in my life, if that makes sense. I don't know. I mean, I'm hard pressed to find like a ad hoc justification right now. You just asked me. I go with the flow.
Yeah, well, that's my impression as well.
I just love it,
Yeah.
I like it. I'm interested in it. We were talking before, you were saying, and I wanted to react on this too, that you cannot approach life as just a simple like Rubik's Cube or problem to solve, because you will fail. And this reminds me of the thesis of Ian McGalbraith in what is it? Is it the Emperor and his emissary? It's about like basically he's the one who democratized the idea of having like a left analytical side of the brain and the right side of the brain that is more creative, or the other way around. I'm not totally sure about that. And so the idea was that for some problems you need to be like full on analytical, like you said, Rubik's Cube, playing chess, but for like larger life problems, like you need to have a mix of both. You need to be able to troubleshoot and be extremely analytical with like black and white, like mathematical problems, but you also need to have this like decentralized way of thinking. Maybe this is not the decentered, more like way of thinking that allows you to basically to forage for new information, be open to creative ideas, and this is another way. It's another tactic that we evolutionarily developed to be able to solve problems. So you need both, actually.
You need both, and absolutely. And there's actually science that has, shown how the brain tries to solve these problems, and how that is correlated to autism in many cases, and to the savant phenomenon. People who are extremely good at something, but then not very good at something else. It's quite interesting. I remember my dad used to. I used to talk to my dad for hours and hours about things as well, and he talked about. He actually wrote an article about how some people think in shapes and colors, like they don't form sentences in their heads as they're trying to solve a problem or trying to talk or think about anything. Everything is abstract, where other people will think in sentences and put everything into neat little boxes. And I remember when he talked about that, and I was like, I've never ever really formed a sentence in my head. It's always been blue or a box, or and it's the same way with music. Like whenever I think of a song or think of a certain progression or something, I always try to express it as, I don't know, like a color or a shape or something, and then trying to communicate that to you guys in the band writing music. That's the challenge, because I think you guys are a lot better at using both worlds.
Yeah.
Where I'm kind of stuck in the.
I think you're selling yourself short. But I know. I think I know where you're getting at.
I mean,
just as a side note, the book I think is called The Master and His Emissary, and the author is Ian McGilchrist. I think I got it wrong.
Okay.
But I think it's generally it's something I learn as I grow old. It's just like this ability to appreciate how different people approach things. It's extremely hard, especially when you're younger, to have like a good, not even good, but like even okay concept of how many ways there are to skin a cat. I mean, it's a horrible idiom, but how people, it is another thing that seems to be trite, but it's something I'm realizing more and more, is like how different, like the neurodiversity out there, how differently people, and sometimes you meet someone and you're totally amazed by their ability to solve one kind of problem or create one kind of artifact, and they're just completely unable to do things that seem to be to you to be so simple and so obvious. But in our case, I wouldn't say that you are so different than us.
Okay.
I mean, you have a very analytical approach generally. Maybe you're rejecting like the idea of music theory a little bit, but like, for example, if we're talking about tone and sound and how to park a car with like a 10-meter long, like how do you call it, like the thing in the back of the car? I'm telling you, I'm losing my English.
Your
a trailer.
Trailer or a hatch. Hook.
Yeah, I'm sure you're not like, you're thinking very analytically about these things, and you can do it better than any one of us could. Or building a motorcycle.
Well, yeah, and there's the thing. I had to learn it the hard way. Like when I was 18, I wanted to find my identity, and I was all over the place. I mean, I had no sense of organization or putting things the way they were supposed to be. I just kind of did things by the flow. It's hard to describe, but I did feel that I didn't have the roots that I needed. I wanted to find myself in many ways. I think many 18, 19-year-olds do, and for me that meant going back to my roots and going to Denmark. And so I was living in the States, and I was like, all right, I'm going to go to Denmark, and I'm going to see what happens. And what's a good way to do that? Well, I could become a Royal Guard. And in the beginning, I was like, all right, I'll do that for a year, which is, just conscript service. And, I fell in love with it. And it gave me what I needed in life. It gave me that ability to organize, to think in a different way, to solve problems with other people in mind. So it's not about me anymore. It's about how we function as a unit, as a society. And I figured it was a very, very valuable tool. So then I fell in love with the camaraderie, the feeling of being part of something that actually meant something, and so I stayed with it. And then later I took an officer's, which is the equivalent of like an education, the equivalent of in the beginning a bachelor's, and then later a master's. And so I did that, and that gave me what I needed, and that's the reason that I was able to learn how to organize my thoughts in many ways. So I'm not naturally inclined to being like that. In fact, I'm very naturally opposed to finding structure in things. But I realized that I need to, and now I have the tools to do so, and that's what enabled me to do things like when I said, like you said, building a motorcycle. Well, I wanted a motorcycle, but I didn't want to just go buy one because I thought that I could do it better myself, or at least look, the design of it. And so I had to learn it. And how do you learn something? Well, you dig into the videos, the YouTube videos, the manuals, and this and that. And I broke a lot of things. But
yeah, that's the way.
But that's where it came from. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, how interesting would it be to meet versions of yourself that would have made different life choices, you know?
Oh, I mean, if I met myself now as I was when I was 19, 20, or 22 or something, I would kick my own ass. I would hate myself. I would be like that. Oh gosh, how annoying.
Yeah, but what if you met another like 40-year-old version of yourself that took drastically different
In a
life?
parallel universe.
Yeah, would it be an alter ego? Would it be like a brother or a cousin, or would it be a nemesis? You know?
It's a thought-provoking thing, because how much of ourselves are we actually? You know? Because then you think about basically everything I am as a person, my ideologies, my political affiliations, my everything about me.
Yeah.
The type of clothes I wear, everything about me is a product of something that has been handed down to me, or whatever that I've come into contact with, and how much of that is actually me. Like, it's a big question of like, what is a soul, basically, right? Because if we say, if we just play the game that we say all right, souls exist, we'll say that, right? We don't know, but we'll say that they do. Well, what are they? If it is a thing that kind of is reoccurring and goes, into body, to the next body, to the next body, how much of that is that individual personality? How much of that trickles down into the person that we are? And that's really weird, because if I did meet a parallel version of myself, I'm pretty sure I'd be a completely different person. I mean, even just like 10 years ago, I was a completely different person.
Yeah. But it's funny because you just like told me we are products of our environment, and then you drop a little bit of soul on top of it. So it's like, bam, you have like this thing called a soul. Nobody really knows what this is. And
well, that's my point. I don't think that
bam,
you can
end of
say,
the episode.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
I'm not a very free will, not a fan of the notion, obviously.
You're not a fan of free will?
I mean, I like it as a heuristic, and I behave as if I had free will, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But as to whether it exists or not, I am strongly biased in the other direction. I would recommend anybody interested in this to check out the book Free Will by Sam Harris. Kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Yes, but at the end of the day, it makes no difference, because does it really matter if it's there or not? What matters is that it feels like you have free will, and that you have this sense of struggle within you when you're like being torn between a good decision and a slightly less good decision and a terrible decision. And some part of you feel the struggle going on, and this is where the illusion or the veracity, of free will stems from, is this like feeling inside of us of struggle and of like a battle going on.
Until you short circuit it with you have things like optical illusions, or
coffee is good.
Coffee, drugs. All of these things will short circuit your perception of reality, and what you thought was what you were convinced was the norm, or was the way things were. And that's when it gets scary, because then you realize that, even just a silly little optical illusion on the internet, on Facebook, and your world comes collapsing into like what it's just really a trick of, what was the blue dress, gold dress thing? Remember that?
Yeah, black and blue, or or white
exactly.
and gold.
One dumb little example, but if that trickles over to any degree into other parts of your life, then how much of ourselves are we actually?
Oh wow, that's an interesting way to approach it. Because usually, like the idea of the dubbit, for example, so it's the duck rabbit. It's like a optical illusion made famous by the way the philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein used it, and you can either see it as a rabbit or as a duck. Either like the beak of the duck are the ears of the rabbit. You probably saw this picture.
Oh yeah. They have the one with the witch also, with the witch.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
that's another, and they have like other funny ones. Yeah. But you can always see either the duck or the rabbit or the old woman or the young one, but never both at the same time.
Yeah.
And you and me could look at the same picture and see two different things. So what does that say about? It tends to show that the picture and the meaning is generated in our brain and not anywhere else,
Yeah.
So that's the idea.
Absolutely. And also with different people will, just like you will see and see things around you in your environment differently than I would. We do that in our perception of people as well. The person that you think you are is not the same person that I think you are, or that other people. It all depends on where we come from, and that will color this. That's part of why I thought it was important to do this. Have like a dialogue with the band members and kind of like show who we are, because we know who we are. We have an idea of how we communicate and how we express ourselves, yet people will see us from the outside and they'll have a completely different perception of what kind of people we are. And I'm hoping that this will kind of open the doors and kind of introduce people to who we actually are, for the better or for the worse.
Yeah, that's the idea, right? Yeah. I mean, we'll see, but it's interesting also, like if we look at ourselves in the mirror for a second as a band, or like everybody has this experience where there are people out there and people are thinking A or B, or there are like men out there or women out there, and there is no such thing. Like there is no way people would perceive the video. It's just individuals. You know what I mean? Yeah.
There's going to be a different perception depending on who sees. I understand
so
that.
we have a relation to people as like a group that's out there that we want to reach, or that we want to get in touch with, that who we want to listen to this song or this one, watch this video.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. It's like always when you're in the public eye, or you're making something that is meant to be public and to be at others' disposal for listening or whatever, you put yourself in this situation where you're dealing with an audience, a public. But it's like kind of this emergent thing that doesn't exist. It's just like your perception. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know if I make myself clear at all, but that's the idea.
It's a very unclear topic also, and I'm not gonna pretend we're neuroscientists or anything. The only thing we have is our own anecdotes and experiences that we can go by. I think we've had the ability to reflect upon it and act upon it artistically and in other ways, which is basically, like you said, in the end, does it really matter? Because it doesn't matter if the universe is a simulation, or if we are fake, or if we do reincarnate, or if we do have free will or don't have free will. At the end of the day, we're here, and we have to act upon what we have, and that's not going to change all of a sudden magically. If you reflect upon it, then you're maybe able to steer it in a certain direction. At least have the perception that you are able to steer it in a certain direction. There's the free will thing again. Who do you want to become, and are you able to become that person?
I mean, there's this idea from David White, who's a Irish poet, and he's also an oceanographer, I think. And I really, really like it. But he talks about the conversational nature of reality. And so you were talking about building yourself. And you were also saying that if anything, you're a product of your own circumstances. And so it feels a little bit like a chess game in which you play a move with your own free will as you perceive it, and then reality plays a move on you.
Yeah.
So maybe you break a leg, or maybe this happens, a good thing or a bad thing, and you react to this, and then a new thing happens. And this is, so a chess game is maybe a worse analogy than his, because it's a zero-sum game. It's finite, and at the end somebody wins or somebody loses, or there's a draw. But
yeah.
But if we conceive of reality as a conversation, I mean, it really makes you humble, doesn't it? Because you realize that you're shaped at least as much by exterior forces than you are by interior forces. Yeah. Like, for example, just a very trite example, very trivial, but I never thought I'd be playing Latin bass lines, It was not an area of my playing I was particularly looking at before, and like exploring this whole area of music that I didn't know much about. Not that I didn't like it, but it was just not one of the avenues that I was hell-bent on exploring.
Yeah.
And this year, half of the bass lines I'm playing are like Latin inspired. And so I'm learning about all these styles, like mambo, huahuanco, cha-cha-cha, and I'm like, and this is just a world of music out there. And this is entirely a product of being in Spain, because Spain has flamenco, of course, but it's also, at least like the school I'm in Valencia, a lot of like people from Latin America and a lot of inspirations from there, and so it's interesting to me to think that, you know, and I'm playing like tumbaos and stuff, so it's fun.
Yeah.
But it's also true for things that are much more dramatic and much more important in our lives.
Yeah, and also, I mean, it's the betterment of ourselves, you know, like the betterment of
ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of, I know it's very controversial, and a lot of people, and you and I have had some discussions about this as well, about the concept of the will to power. I subscribe to the concept of the will to power, where power needs to be understood. It often gets misunderstood because the word power seems like something where we have power over other people. But in essence, the idea is that the will to power is the will to become the best version of ourselves possible. And it tackles a lot of counter arguments as to how much of that is based on survival, like the natural inclinations that we have as individuals to do things in a certain way based on survival instincts, on the necessity to procreate, the necessity to eat, and all of these things. That there is more to that. There's more to life than that, and ultimately it is the attempt, to become better versions of ourselves through acts that in many cases could be construed as being entertaining for ourselves and no one else, maybe not for the greater good necessarily. And to achieve power at its ultimate level would be maybe not the best thing for everybody else, but might be kind of an egoistic approach to life. I like it. It allows me to, and even if it's my own version of it, which it very much is, I'm taking a concept, the concept of will to power, and then kind of packing it into my own little box and saying, okay, what can I do with this? Because it allows me to reflect upon my actions and who I am and why I am who I am, which then ultimately will steer me in a certain direction that I wouldn't have otherwise. So the parallel me that you were talking about may not have done so and may have become something else than what I am now. I like the idea of, to a certain degree, being egoistic about your own necessities in order to achieve a better version of yourself for yourself. Because without that, you're basically useless to society. Is that too much of a mouthful? Or is it too negative? I mean, I know you've said I'm quite nihilistic in many ways as well. Say that? Yes, you have. You've mentioned it a couple of times, and you may be right. I do have a very nihilistic approach to life, and I think the reason for that is very much because of that specific feeling I have in my body of what's important.
Yeah, I don't really know how to approach that, because I mean, it's something I've been touching upon with like podcasts. You know, as soon as there is like a certain minute count, we get into the meaning of life, and then the next topic is the limits of expression, of conversation. The thing is with like these concepts, I mean, I'm not a big fan of Nietzsche at all. Even though I read him and about him, but for the very reason that makes Nietzsche so seductive for some people is that Nietzsche is like so nebulous and blurry that like you can fit whatever you want with Nietzsche, and Nietzsche himself had no clue probably what he was. I mean, maybe I shouldn't say that, but he said that he was unclear or like hard to comprehend on purpose. It was kind of a test.
Yeah.
And he also said that he was terrified of the interpreters that would come after his death to like say, oh, he meant this or he meant that.
Well, it's been used historically to, I mean, in many cases, misconstrued to support quite evil ideologies. And
yeah, I mean,
the man wasn't perfect,
of course,
obviously.
Yeah, but there is the whole thing with his sister that like
Yeah,
like reuse some of his text to like go in the direction of Nazi ideology, when we know that he was absolutely not an anti-Semite, quite the opposite. So this is pretty clear that it was like misused and used against his will to say things that he didn't mean at all.
10 minutes on a Google search and you know that, but many people don't spend that time, so they don't.
Yeah, of course, but it's just at the end of the day, it's like whatever floats your boat. I feel like because these concepts are so out there that we're never going to be able to prove them or disprove them. They are like kind of like ideas that you hold dear and that keep you going, and so their value is not in their like truth value per se, or like in their like claim on objective reality, if there's such a thing, but rather on whether they enable you to wake up every morning and do something that is good for you and that is pro-social. And that's when we're touching on.
That's why like it's the application that's important. It doesn't really matter where you get the ideas. It's, can you use this and can you reflect upon it and can you use it to become... I think the concept of trying to be the best version of oneself is quite universal. It doesn't matter if it was Nietzsche or Mickey Mouse. I mean, because...
Yeah, I mean, this is also your interpretation of the will to power, because I know, I mean, people interpret it in a myriad different ways. This reminds me of the idea of conatus by Baruch Spinoza, you know, so it's like that every being wants to persevere in its being. So for the plant, it means to grow as tall as possible, to get as much sunlight as possible. And for you, maybe it's to play like the coolest riff, or to transmit as much emotion as possible, or to tell the most touching story. Yeah. But there is also a whole like narrative fallacy that we have, where we look at what we've done and at what we're planning on doing, and we fit it into a narrative. And I think that we need to have a lot of humility there, because how many times did it happen to me and to many others, I'm sure, to be like, oh yeah, this is happening, A is happening, B is happening, I'm fitting it into my narrative like this is perfect, it's gonna help me get to my next checkpoint. And then like something slope. But then something goes out of whack and you're like, oh, it was not a good idea at all after all. So it's just, I feel like in some ways we're just like, I mean, maybe I'm pessimistic, but there's a part of like Sisyphean, like person, a sailor on a ship without a sail. I mean, with a sail.
Oh my God, that's scary.
But with no, how's it called? With no rudder.
Yeah.
Or maybe a happier way to see it is like it's like a dog, you know, when you're walking your dog on a leash. And your dog is like seeing something super interesting. He's like, he's like going in that direction, but you pull on the leash. And so your dog is like going in the opposite direction. And he's just as excited to go explore this like corner of the street than the one that you just pulled him away from.
I like that. So I like that a lot. That's very telling. Also because there are many different kinds of dogs and they all have different personalities. And one may be interested like that in everything. And the other one may just like look into the ground like a hound dog or whatever they're called, a beagle. You know, the beagles, they always have their noses in the ground.
But the idea remains the same, that they are like always excited in what is in front of their nose. Like they don't give any thought to like that I don't know, that car tire that they saw like 2 minutes ago, and that smelled so interesting, or I don't exactly know how they experience things, but you know.
That's really cool. I like that. Well, I mean, the band itself, Substereo, I've mentioned. I mentioned in the previous podcast with Robin that we'd gone through approximately 13 bass players. I feel like we.
Am I number 13?
I think you're number 13. I think so. I have to check that. If you
That's
are,
fine.
then
I'm not superstitious.
That explains everything. No. I think it's awesome. It's awesome that we've gotten to a place where, I mean, your contribution to the band has been really what we needed. I think not only musically, the next songs that we've released, we decided not to release the new songs because when you joined the band, we started writing a few songs.
Yeah.
And those songs were going to be released here at the beginning of 2021, but we decided to finish the Renaissance series first to get that out of the way, because we didn't want to, make confusion as to what songs belong to what project. But when those songs come out, I mean, the melodies that you've put in and everything, that really has allowed, to touch on become the best version of ourselves possible as a band. I think, the bass players we've had in the past have also been amazing. I mean, I'm not putting them down in any way. I think they've done great jobs, but we've just managed to click on a certain level that is then, correlated or been, it's kind of like trickled over into the art. And I think I think personally with the next songs, I like the Renaissance series, but the next songs have elevated us to a level that we've never been at before.
I mean, I have fond memories of like these recording sessions or like jam sessions that were not so long ago, but it's just like going to like the outskirts of Berlin, like burying ourselves into that like rehearsal space. Yeah. And it's worked really well. Like I just remember being in a kind of like trance-like state, and we're just playing and having ideas, and you are screaming at Robin and he's screaming back at you, but it's all in good fun, because you all have like everybody is super passionate and they know where they want to take the song next. And I play this like I remember playing on the dingwall, playing this bass line, like the 16th note syncopated bass line that you didn't like at all, and you were like, this is shit, this is not Substereo at all. 2 weeks later, you're like, oh, I love that bass line, man, it's great.
It's the best thing ever. Yeah. Well, because it pushes me out of my comfort zone,
Yeah.
And while
but that's just what I heard. That's just what I heard in my head, This thing is what I heard. Yeah. And I really liked where you took it, like also with the... Yeah, I'm excited for these songs to be released. I don't want to say too much, but...
No, yeah.
I don't know. Well, I mean, they have a lot of meaning for me already, and I hope like they will touch people as well. But as far as I'm concerned, I'm happy with these songs. Like they represent a part of my life and something we've built together. So
absolutely.
Something to be proud of. Yeah.
Well, let's keep doing that. We really look forward to when you're finishing your degree in the summer, and we'll see. We'll take it from day to day and see what happens there. Yeah. But I mean, we can. That's a cool thing that we've also been looking at some tracks while you've been in Spain and bouncing them back and forth and getting ideas. And so it's not like many people may think, oh, okay, so you're in Spain. That means that actually that means we're just as concentrated as ever before. I think that this last year we've been probably more effective than any other any other years that we've had the band together. I think we've really achieved a lot this year, and for me that's important that we think that we're satisfied, and that's largely due to your participation, which is awesome.
Well, appreciate it. But it's true that we're very much in contact. Also, like, not only to talk about music, but just about life in general.
Yeah.
And this is very nice. Yeah.
Well,
but it's true. I'm very much in the bubble here. I kind of forgot about. Yeah, in a way. I mean, I'm just like the dogs I was describing. I'm just like focused on whatever is in front of me and trying to get this thing right.
Yeah.
But I'm looking forward to what the future will bring for sure.
Well, the stuff you've posted has been amazing. From there, like your studio sessions, you're doing a lot of recordings right now. Which is that's really cool. Very different genre than what Substereo does, but that just enriches our
I think
our
so.
palette.
I mean, for me as a musician, definitely, it's like brings a lot of different contexts to stuff that I was playing before, and it brings new ideas to the table as well.
Yeah, it's amazing. Well, Batou, I love our conversations as always. I really enjoyed this one.
So did I.
I hope to see you soon again. I do mean it when I say we do miss you. I look forward to having you here for a cup of tea.
When was the last time we saw each other?
I think November, maybe? No, something like that. No, before then, yeah?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we haven't seen each other since... But did we see each other in, like, last summer?
Yeah, just before you left.
Okay, so that was the last time.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, 6 months more.
Yeah, more than
time flies. Yeah.
And before we know it, this will be over. I don't know if the Corona crisis is probably going to keep on going, but
Well, we'll see. We'll
see.
just
We'll see what
like
happens.
play our moves based on what reality plays.
It's not
and
bothering me.
adapt.
I mean, we've been busy. You know, it's been
Yeah.
amazing. The only thing is playing live is a problem, but
Yeah, I mean it's fine by me too, but I'm aware that I'm one of the lucky ones.
yeah, it's not like we make our the biggest part of our living from playing live anyway. If that were the case,
Mhm.
then it would really hurt, and a lot of people are hurting. I know that, but
Yeah.
if in our case, that was never the main part of who we are. So at this point, it doesn't really affect us as much. It's more the creativity that it allows us to develop, and so I'm okay with it. Cool. All right. Well, I'll catch you soon, brother.
Yeah. See you soon.